My name is Eden, and I'm 23 years old with a beautiful 5-year-old son named Noah, who means everything to me. 6 years ago, my life shattered when I got pregnant in high school. My father, a church deacon, looked at me with disgust and shouted, "You're no daughter of mine," while my mother screamed for me to get out. I left that night with nowhere to go, raising my son completely alone. Then 5 years later, my parents suddenly appeared at Noah's birthday party. The moment they saw him, they froze in shock, whispering, "What? What is this?" Before I continue my story, let me know where you're watching from and hit subscribe if you've ever had to rebuild your life from scratch. Your support means everything to single parents like me. I grew up in a small conservative town in Pennsylvania where everyone knew everyone's business, and Sunday church attendance was practically mandatory. My father, James, was a respected deacon at First Baptist Church, a pillar of the community whose approval everyone sought. My mother, Diana, was the quintessential homemaker who volunteered for every church function and kept our house spotless for unexpected visitors, which happened frequently in her position as the deacon's wife. From my earliest memories, expectations in our household were crystal clear. Excellence was the minimum standard. B grades were met with disappointment. Clothes had to be modest and pristine, and any behavior that might reflect poorly on the family was strictly forbidden. When I was 8, I accidentally spilled juice on my Sunday dress minutes before church. My mother's eyes filled with tears as she frantically changed me, whispering that, "Appearances matter, Eden. People are always watching us." Despite the pressure, I genuinely believed my parents loved me. Dad would sometimes sneak me ice cream after particularly difficult piano recitals, and Mom would brush my hair 100 strokes each night while telling me Bible stories. There was affection in our home, just heavily wrapped in expectations and rules. I excelled academically without much effort, which pleased my parents tremendously. By junior high, I was taking advanced placement classes and leading the debate team to state championships. At church, I was the model youth group member, volunteering for mission trips and leading Bible study for younger kids. On the surface, I was the perfect daughter of the perfect family. But beneath that polished exterior, I was suffocating. Every decision, from the friends I made to the books I read, fell under my parents' scrutiny. My curfew remained embarrassingly early even as I entered high school. My clothing was purchased by my mother until I was 16, and even then she had to approve every item. I wasn't allowed social media accounts because good Christian girls don't put themselves on display. My sophomore year marked the beginning of my silent rebellion. Nothing dramatic, just small acts of defiance. I kept a journal my parents didn't know about hidden beneath my mattress. I changed clothes in the school bathroom, sometimes swapping modest turtlenecks for borrowed scoop neck tops. I created a secret email account at the library computers to communicate with friends without surveillance. Then junior year, Lucas transferred to our school. With his slightly too long hair, vintage band t-shirts, and quiet confidence, he instantly stood out in our conformist town. His family had moved from Seattle after his father got a job at the local university, and Lucas brought with him perspectives that fascinated me. He questioned things, spoke about books our school would never assign, and treated religion as something to explore, rather than simply accept. We were paired for a history project, and those study sessions in the library became the highlight of my week. With Lucas, I could voice doubts I'd never dared speak aloud. When I admitted I wasn't sure I believed everything my church taught, he didn't look horrified. He asked thoughtful questions about what I did believe. He listened without judgment when I confessed my frustration with my parents' control. Our first kiss happened behind the stacks in the reference section, surrounded by dusty encyclopedias. It was tentative and sweet, nothing like the sinful temptation my parents warned about. Lucas never pressured me for more content, with holding hands beneath library tables and stealing brief moments between classes. My parents would have forbidden the relationship immediately if they'd known. Lucas didn't attend church. His parents were liberal professors, and he openly questioned authority, all red flags in their world. So we became experts at secrecy. I told my parents I joined additional study groups, volunteered at the library, or helped younger students with tutoring. Lucas would pick me up blocks from wherever I claimed to be, and we'd find places to talk freely. The lake outside town, the 24-hour diner in the next county, abandoned parking lots where we could just exist without judgment. As our relationship deepened over those months, I began seeing my parents differently. Their rules no longer felt like protection but like prison bars. Their certainty about everything, politics, religion, proper behavior, seemed increasingly narrow-minded rather than righteous. The community I once thought was caring now felt suffocating with its gossip and judgment. By the spring of junior year, the emotional distance between my parents and me had grown enormous, though they hardly noticed since I maintained the perfect daughter facade. I made honor roll, attended church, and said all the right things at dinner. But inside, I was already pulling away, questioning the values they had instilled, and dreaming of a future where I could make my own choices. What I didn't realize then was how dramatically those choices would change the course of my life, or how completely my parents' conditional love would be tested when faced with the ultimate challenge to their perfect family image. The first sign something was wrong came in April, about 8 months before graduation. My period, usually as predictable as my mother's Sunday pot roast, didn't arrive. I tracked my cycles meticulously, partly because my mother had taught me that responsible young ladies monitor their health, and partly because any irregularity terrified me given what Lucas and I had been doing. At first, I convinced myself it was stress from AP exams and college applications, but when week 2 passed with no change, the knot in my stomach grew impossible to ignore. I confided in my best friend Abigail, the only person besides Lucas who knew about our relationship. "You need to take a test, Eden," she said firmly. "Right now." Purchasing a pregnancy test in our small town was impossible. Someone would definitely tell my parents. So Abigail drove us 30 minutes to a pharmacy in the neighboring county. I wore sunglasses and a baseball cap, feeling like a criminal as I paid cash for the test with shaking hands. We took it in a gas station bathroom, the epitome of glamour for such a life-changing moment. Those 3 minutes waiting for the result were the longest of my life. Abigail held my hand as we sat on the disgusting floor, neither of us speaking. When 2 pink lines appeared clear as day, the world tilted sideways. "This can't be happening," I whispered, staring at the plastic stick that had just detonated my carefully planned future. "We were careful, most of the time." "What are you going to do?" Abigail asked, her face pale with concern. That question echoed in my head for days afterward. I tried calling Lucas immediately, but his phone went straight to voicemail. When I went by his house, a for sale sign stood in the yard, and the neighbors said the family had moved suddenly when his father received an emergency job offer overseas. He'd left me a letter explaining the situation, apologizing profusely, and promising to stay in touch. But the international phone number he provided never connected, and emails bounced back undelivered. Just like that, I was completely alone with a decision that would alter my entire life. I considered all options, researching frantically on library computers. Adoption, abortion, keeping the baby. Each path seemed impossible in its own way. Abortion went against everything I had been raised to believe, though I understood now why someone would make that choice. Adoption meant carrying the pregnancy to term in full view of our judgmental community, and keeping the baby as a teenage single mother. With what resources? After 2 weeks of agonizing, I realized what I needed to do. Despite everything, I wanted this baby. Something deep inside me had already connected with the tiny life growing inside me, and I couldn't let it go. I would tell my parents, deal with their disappointment, and figure out how to move forward with their help. Surely their religious values meant they would support their daughter and grandchild, even through an unplanned pregnancy. Blood was thicker than reputation, wasn't it? I planned the conversation carefully, choosing a Friday night when Dad would be relaxed after a week of work. I made my mother's favorite lemon chicken for dinner and set the table with the good dishes. The mundane normalcy of passing potatoes and discussing the weather felt surreal given the bomb I was about to drop. After dessert, while my parents sipped decaf coffee, I took a deep breath. "Mom, Dad, I need to tell you something important." Their expressions were expectant, perhaps anticipating news about a scholarship or academic award. "I'm pregnant." The words hung in the air like smoke. For several heartbeats, nobody moved. Then my father's coffee cup crashed to the floor, shattered porcelain and brown liquid spreading across my mother's immaculate hardwood. "What did you say?" His voice was dangerously quiet. I repeated myself, my voice stronger than I expected. I'm pregnant, almost 3 months along. Who? My mother barely whispered the question. His name is Lucas. He transferred here last. The university professor's son, that long-haired boy. My father's face darkened to a dangerous shade of red. The one who never attended church. Before I could answer, he erupted, pounding his fist on the table hard enough to make the silverware jump. No daughter of mine would do something so disgraceful. No daughter of mine would throw away her future for some boy. My mother began to cry, loud theatrical sobs that seemed more concerned with herself than with me. What will people say? How will we face everyone at church? You've disgraced us completely. I'm still the same person, I tried to explain. This doesn't change who I am or what I can achieve. Where is this boy now? My father demanded. Will he make this right? He moved away. His family relocated overseas. My father laughed bitterly. Of course he did. Took what he wanted and left you with the consequences. And now you expect us to clean up your mess. I don't expect anything. I'm just telling you what's happening. I'm keeping the baby. That's when my mother stopped crying and looked at me with cold eyes I'd never seen before. No. You have two options, Eden. You get rid of this problem immediately, or you are no longer welcome in this home. The ultimatum stunned me into silence. Get rid of the problem. From my pro-life mother who volunteered at crisis pregnancy centers. You can't be serious, I finally managed. Dead serious, my father said. We will not have this shame brought upon our family. You will not parade your sin through this community and destroy everything we've built. Make your choice right now. A strange calm settled over me. In that moment, I saw my parents clearly for the first time, not as the loving if strict guardians of my childhood, but as people more concerned with appearances than with their own daughter's well-being. I've already made my choice, I said quietly. I'm having this baby. Then get out of my house, my mother screamed, her composure completely shattered. Get out! You've disgraced us! My father stood pointing toward the stairs. Pack your things tonight. I want you gone before morning. You're no daughter of mine. I remember walking up those stairs with wooden legs, hearing my mother's sobs and my father's angry muttering below. In my childhood bedroom, I mechanically filled a suitcase and backpack with clothes, toiletries, and the small amount of cash I'd saved from birthday gifts. I took practical things, my laptop, phone charger, winter coat, moving on autopilot. The photo albums and childhood mementos stayed behind. They belonged to a family that no longer existed. When I came downstairs, my parents had retreated to their bedroom. Not even a goodbye. I stood in our living room one last time, surrounded by family portraits displaying smiles that now seemed as fake as my parents' conditional love. Then I walked out the front door into the cold April night, 17 years old, pregnant and completely alone. The first night after my parents kicked me out, I slept in my car parked behind the public library. I woke up with a stiff neck morning sickness and the crushing realization that this wasn't a nightmare I could wake from. This was my new reality. Basic survival suddenly became my full-time job. Where would I sleep? What would I eat? How would I continue school? And most importantly, how would I care for the life growing inside me? For 3 days, I maintained a precarious routine, brushing my teeth in fast food restaurant bathrooms, changing clothes in department store fitting rooms, and parking in different locations each night to avoid attracting attention. I told the school I had mononucleosis to explain my absence, buying time to figure out a long-term plan. The breaking point came on the 4th day, when hunger and exhaustion overwhelmed me. I broke down crying in my car outside a grocery store, unable to muster the energy to even go inside. That's when I finally called Abigail. Eden, where have you been? She demanded. I've been texting you for days. Through sobs, I explained everything. Without hesitation, she said, Come to my house, now. Abigail's parents were divorced, and her mother, Janet, worked as a nurse. When we explained my situation, Janet's eyes filled with compassion rather than judgment. You'll stay with us while we figure something out, she said firmly, leading me to their spare room. That night, I slept in a real bed, showered in a real bathroom, and ate a home-cooked meal for what felt like the first time in years. The relief was overwhelming. But the arrangement wasn't sustainable. Within days, rumors spread through our small town about my situation. Church members called Janet expressing concern about her harboring a bad influence for Abigail. The high school principal questioned whether I should continue attending regular classes given my condition. It seemed my parents' fear of community judgment wasn't entirely unfounded. Janet, however, proved to be the first of several angels who appeared when I needed them most. She helped me apply for emergency Medicaid for prenatal care and connected me with a community center for young mothers. Most importantly, she helped me find a tiny studio apartment I could actually afford with my savings and a part-time job. "It's not much," she said as we toured the 400-square-foot space with its kitchenette and pull-out sofa. "But it's a start." It was my first home that wasn't under my parents' control, and despite its shabbiness, it represented independence I'd never known. With shelter secured, I turned to income. The manager at a local diner hired me for morning shifts, allowing me to attend afternoon classes. After school and on weekends, I worked at a retail store until my pregnancy became too obvious, at which point I switched to phone customer service I could do from home. Working 2 jobs while pregnant and finishing high school nearly broke me. Morning sickness didn't respect my work schedule. My feet and back ached constantly. I fell asleep during classes and struggled to complete assignments. But what choice did I have? The nurses at the community clinic became my lifeline, particularly Marlene, a grandmother-aged labor and delivery nurse who took a special interest in my case. "You remind me of my daughter," she explained during one checkup. She was a teen mom too. Now she's a pediatrician. Marlene checked in on me between appointments, brought me prenatal vitamins when I couldn't afford them, and even drove me to appointments when my car broke down. When I worried about giving birth alone, she promised to be there regardless of whether she was on shift. "Everyone deserves someone in their corner on the biggest day of their life," she said simply. At the Young Mothers Community Center, I found something equally valuable: peers who understood. Once a week, we gathered for education classes that came with a free meal and childcare for those who already had babies. The women ranged from 13 to 22 each, with her own story of how she ended up pregnant and alone. There was Jasmine, kicked out like me, but with nowhere to go until the center helped her find housing. There was Tanya, whose boyfriend stayed until the baby was born, then disappeared. There was Kyra, raped by a family member and choosing to keep a child conceived in violence. Compared to some of their situations, I felt almost lucky. We learned about pregnancy, childbirth, and infant care together. We shared resources and hand-me-downs. Most importantly, we reminded each other that we weren't alone even when it felt that way. As my due date approached in November, I completed my GED rather than returning to high school for my senior year. The flexibility of self-paced study allowed me to work more hours and prepare for the baby's arrival. With help from the center and donations from Janet and Marlene, I gradually acquired essentials: a crib, car seat, diapers, and tiny clothes. My water broke 2 weeks early while I was stocking shelves at the retail job. My manager called an ambulance while I called Abigail and Marlene. By the time I reached the hospital, contractions were coming fast and hard. 17 hours of labor followed. Abigail held my hand through every contraction while Marlene, true to her word, came directly from her shift at another hospital to advocate for me with the medical staff. When the doctor finally placed my son on my chest, the world stopped. His tiny red face scrunched in outrage at the indignity of birth. His perfect fingers wrapped around mine with surprising strength, the weight of him so light yet somehow containing my entire world. "Hello, Noah." I whispered the name I'd chosen months before. "I'm your mom. We're going to be okay." In that moment, looking into my son's eyes, I made a silent promise that would define the next 5 years. He would never feel unwanted or conditional love. He would always know his worth didn't depend on meeting someone else's expectations. And somehow, I would give him everything he needed, even without the family I'd lost. The reality of single motherhood made those promises immediately challenging. The first weeks were a blur of sleepless nights, endless feeding sessions, and tears, both Noah's and mine. I recovered from childbirth while learning to care for a newborn, with no parental guidance, relying on books, YouTube videos, and frantic calls to Marlene. I returned to work just 2 weeks after giving birth, leaving Noah with a neighbor who watched children in her home at rates I could barely afford. I'd feed him at 5 a.m., work the breakfast shift at the diner, race home to nurse him again, then log into my customer service job while he napped beside me. On good days, I managed 4 hours of sleep in broken segments. On bad days, much less, despite exhaustion that made my bones ache. I started online classes toward an associate's degree when Noah turned 6 months old. I studied during his naps, and after he went to sleep, often nodding off myself with textbooks spread across the kitchen table. Every penny was budgeted. Diapers came before new shoes for me. Winter meant extra blankets rather than turning up the heat. Food stamps and WIC helped with groceries, but pride made accepting assistance difficult at first. Eventually, necessity overcame embarrassment. But amid the struggle came moments of pure joy I'd never have experienced otherwise. Noah's first smile directed at me after a middle-of-the-night feeding. His first steps taken toward me across our tiny apartment. The way he laughed when I made silly faces, a full-body giggle that made every sacrifice worthwhile. We created our own traditions. Birthday cupcakes with a single candle. Christmas morning with just the two of us in matching pajamas. Weekend adventures to the free local library for story time and the park when weather permitted. By Noah's first birthday, we had found our rhythm. I was exhausted, but functioning, broke, but surviving, lonely, but filled with love for my son. Against all odds, we were making it work. The daughter my parents had discarded was raising her son with a determination they never imagined I possessed. Noah, at 3 years old, was sunshine in human form, curious, affectionate, and surprisingly empathetic for a toddler. His dark curls bounced when he ran, which was almost constantly, and his vocabulary expanded daily with words that alternately impressed and mortified me when repeated in public. Our circumstances had gradually improved. I'd completed my associate's degree in business administration online and secured a steady job at a local bookstore called Turning Pages. The owner, Barbara, was a grandmother herself who understood the challenges of single parenthood and offered flexible scheduling and occasional emergency babysitting when Noah's regular daycare arrangements fell through. "Bring him in if you're ever stuck," she'd insisted. "We'll set him up with books in the children's corner." Our tiny studio apartment had been replaced by a slightly less tiny one-bedroom in a modest complex with a playground. Noah had his own space now, just big enough for a toddler bed, small dresser, and bookshelf overflowing with yard sale treasures. I still slept on a pull-out sofa in the living room, but having separate spaces felt like tremendous progress. The walls displayed Noah's finger-painting masterpieces alongside photographs documenting our life together. His first steps, birthday celebrations with the small circle of friends we'd gathered, beach trips to the lake during summer. No family portraits with grandparents or extended relatives, just the family we'd created ourselves. My online degree had opened unexpected doors. I discovered an aptitude for web design during a required digital media course and started building simple websites for local businesses as a side hustle while Noah slept. What began as an extra $100 here and there grew into a steady supplemental income that allowed small luxuries we'd never had before. Occasional takeout dinners, new clothes rather than thrift store finds, and even a modest savings account labeled Noah's Future. Our daily routine had stabilized into comforting predictability. Mornings meant breakfast together while I quizzed Noah on colors and numbers. Drop-off at Miss Patty's home daycare, where he'd joined a small group of children he called his school friends. Work at the bookstore while answering client emails during lunch breaks. Pick up by 5 dinner bath stories and bedtime by 8. Then several hours of website work before collapsing into bed myself. Weekends were sacred, reserved exclusively for Noah with no work allowed unless absolutely necessary. We explored every free activity within driving distance: nature walks, library events, community festivals, and church programs, though I carefully selected progressive congregations, unlike my parents' judgmental environment. It was during one of these ordinary weekends when Noah first asked about his extended family. We were at the playground when he noticed an older man pushing a little girl on the swings. "Is that her grandpa?" he asked, pointing with the directness only preschoolers possess. "I think so, buddy. It looks like they're having fun together." Noah watched them for several minutes, his expression unusually serious. "I don't have a grandpa." The simple observation knocked the wind from me. While I'd prepared for questions about his father eventually, I hadn't anticipated the grandparent conversation so soon. Well, I said carefully, everyone's family looks different. Some kids have grandparents who live far away or in heaven. Some have lots of grandparents and some don't have any at all. Where are my grandparents? Do I have any? I sat beside him on the playground bench, searching for age-appropriate honesty. You do have grandparents. They live in the same town as us, actually. But sometimes grown-ups have disagreements that make it hard for them to be together. Like when Jaden took my truck and wouldn't give it back. I smiled at the simplification. Something like that, but bigger grown-up problems. Maybe someday things will be different, but for now it's just you and me. And we make a pretty great team, don't we? The explanation satisfied him temporarily, but the question returned in different forms over the following months. Each time I tried to balance truth with protection, never speaking ill of my parents, but never sugarcoating their rejection either. The hardest moments came during holidays and school events. Noah's preschool Thanksgiving feast featured a Grandparents' Day component that left him sitting alone while other children introduced elderly visitors. For the Father's Day craft project, his teacher thoughtfully suggested he make his gift for me instead, but the substitution only highlighted his differences from classmates. These moments triggered both grief and anger I thought I'd processed long ago. In rare quiet evenings after Noah slept, I'd sometimes drive past my childhood home, slowing to glimpse the life continuing without me. The Christmas decorations my mother still arranged precisely the same way each year. My father's car in the driveway returning from the church where he continued serving as deacon, his reputation apparently intact despite discarding his only daughter. During the first year after Noah's birth, I'd sent photos and updates through Abigail, who remained in limited contact with my parents through church functions. Each envelope was returned unopened with "addressee unknown," written in my father's distinctive handwriting. After the third rejection, I stopped trying. The finality of their decision occasionally overwhelmed me on difficult days, when Noah had a high fever and I had no family to call for advice, when work and school deadlines coincided with his stomach flu, when I simply longed for someone to share in the joy of his first lost tooth or successful swim lesson. At Marlene's gentle insistence, I eventually sought therapy through a sliding scale community program. Weekly sessions with Dr. Taylor helped me process the abandonment and rebuild my self-worth separate from my parents' approval. Your parents made their choice, Eden, Dr. Taylor reminded me during one particularly difficult session. And every day you make yours, to be present for Noah, to break the cycle of conditional love. That's extraordinary courage. Those sessions helped me recognize the strength I'd developed. The scared, pregnant teenager sleeping in her car had become a capable young woman, managing career, education, and motherhood simultaneously. I'd built a life from nothing but determination and the kindness of a few crucial people who believed in me when my own family didn't. By Noah's fourth birthday, I rarely thought about reconciliation anymore. The fantasy of my parents recognizing their mistake and begging forgiveness had faded into acceptance that some relationships couldn't, and perhaps shouldn't, be repaired. Noah and I had created our own family definition, one built on unconditional love rather than obligation or appearances. What I didn't realize was that life rarely follows the neat emotional timelines we create for our healing. Sometimes the past crashes back exactly when we think we've finally moved beyond it. Noah's fifth birthday fell on a perfect October Saturday, with unexpectedly warm weather that allowed for the park party I'd been planning for months. I'd saved carefully to make this celebration special, sensing it represented a milestone for both of us, 5 years of surviving and eventually thriving without my parents' support. The community park pavilion was decorated with superhero banners, Noah's current obsession balloons, and a homemade cake featuring Captain America's shield. I'd invited his entire preschool class, plus the handful of adults who'd become our chosen family: Abigail and her mother Janet Marlene from the hospital, Barbara from the bookstore, and 3 other single mothers I'd bonded with at the community center years ago. The children raced around the playground while the adults chatted and helped arrange presents on the picnic table. Noah, wearing a cape over his special birthday t-shirt, directed an elaborate game involving saving the world from imaginary villains. "You've done an amazing job with this party," Barbara commented, adjusting the tablecloth against the breeze. And with that boy, he's something special. Thanks. I smiled, watching Noah assign superhero identities to his friends with the benevolent authority of a birthday boy. I can't believe it's been 5 years already. Are you still planning to enroll in those bachelor's degree courses next semester? Marlene asked. Applications are in. If the financial aid comes through, I'll start in January. Just 2 classes at a time so I can still manage everything else. The conversation continued, discussing work schedules and Noah's upcoming kindergarten enrollment, when I noticed him suddenly stop playing and stare toward the parking lot. Following his gaze, I froze. My parents were walking toward our pavilion. 5 years had aged them visibly. My father's hair had turned completely gray, and my mother appeared thinner than I remembered. They moved hesitantly, clearly uncomfortable in the festive environment where they recognized no one. Time seemed to suspend as I processed their presence. How did they know about the party? Why come now after 5 years of complete silence? The questions paralyzed me until Noah broke away from his friends and ran to my side. Mommy, who are those people looking at us? His voice snapped me back to protective mother mode. I crouched to his level. They're just people I used to know, sweetie. Why don't you go back and play while I talk to them? Noah hesitated, unusually perceptive as always. They look sad. Sometimes grown-ups have complicated feelings. Go on now, your friends are waiting. As he rejoined his game, I approached my parents, stopping several feet away, close enough for conversation but maintaining a clear boundary. What are you doing here? My voice came out steadier than I expected. My mother spoke first, her eyes never leaving Noah's retreating form. Abigail's mother told us about the party when she saw your mother at the grocery store. We wanted to see you. After 5 years of returning my letters unopened, after throwing me out when I needed you most, the hurt I thought I'd processed resurfaced with surprising intensity. Eden, please, my father began, but his words faltered as Noah ran back into view, laughing with another boy. The moment they got a clear look at him, both my parents physically recoiled. My mother's hand flew to her mouth, and my father turned an ashen color I'd never seen before. What is this? My father whispered, his voice strangled. The strange reaction confused me. This is Noah's birthday party. My son's birthday party. The grandson you've never bothered to meet. No, that's not. My mother's voice trembled. He looks exactly like... And before she could finish, Noah noticed us watching and decided to investigate. He bounced over with the exuberance only a 5-year-old on his birthday could possess. Hi, I'm Noah, and I'm 5 today. He held up his hand with fingers spread wide. Are you friends with my mommy? My parents stood frozen, staring at Noah with expressions I couldn't interpret. Something between shock, horror, and fascination. Noah, honey, these are... I hesitated, unsure how to introduce the grandparents who had rejected him before birth. My father knelt slowly, bringing himself to Noah's eye level. His voice quavered. You look just like someone we used to know. Noah tilted his head, studying my father with innocent curiosity. Who? Before any answer came, my mother let out a strangled sob and turned away. The sound frightened Noah, who backed up against my legs. I think you should leave, I said firmly. This is my son's birthday party and you're upsetting him. Eden, wait, my father pleaded. We need to talk. About him. About Michael. The name hit me like a physical blow. Michael, my brother who died before I was born. The brother whose name was never spoken in our house, whose existence was acknowledged only through a single photograph on my mother's dresser. The brother whose death had shaped my entire childhood in ways I was only beginning to understand. Not here. Not now. I placed my hands protectively on Noah's shoulders. This is his special day, and I won't let you ruin it. Noah looked up at me, confused by the tension. Mommy, why is that lady crying? Sometimes people get emotional at birthday parties. I improvised. Why don't you go see if your friends want cake? We'll sing happy birthday in 5 minutes. After Noah reluctantly rejoined his friends, I turned back to my parents. If you want to talk, you can contact me later, but right now I need you to leave. Eden, please understand, my mother said through tears. He looks exactly like Michael at that age. Exactly. It's like seeing a ghost. That's not my problem. You gave up any right to disrupt our lives when you threw me out 5 years ago. Now please leave before you cause a scene that will require much more explanation to my son than I'm prepared to give today. My father nodded slowly, taking my mother's elbow to guide her away. At the edge of the pavilion, he turned back. We're staying at the Holiday Inn, room 237. Please, Eden. There are things you need to know. I watched them retreat to their car, my emotions churning between anger, curiosity, and a disturbing sense that I was missing crucial pieces of my own family history. Abigail appeared at my side. Were those your parents? What happened? I don't know exactly, I replied, watching their car pull away. But they saw Noah and completely fell apart. Something about how he looks like my brother Michael. Your brother? I didn't know you had a brother. I didn't. He died as a child years before I was born. They never talked about him. I shook my head to clear it. But right now, we have a birthday party to finish. Noah deserves that much. The remainder of the party proceeded with cake presents and games, though I moved through it in a daze, my mind replaying my parents' bizarre reaction. Noah thankfully quickly forgot the strange encounter in the excitement of celebrating with friends. But that night, after tucking an exhausted birthday boy into bed surrounded by new toys, I sat alone in our small living room with questions I couldn't answer. What did Noah's resemblance to my long-dead brother mean? And after 5 years of silence, what could my parents possibly want from us now? The week following Noah's birthday party passed in a blur of normal routines performed on autopilot. I took him to preschool, worked my shifts at the bookstore, completed website projects for clients, all while the encounter with my parents played on repeat in my mind. I hadn't contacted them at the Holiday Inn. Pride and self-protection kept me from making that move after years of rejection. But questions multiplied daily. Why had Michael never been discussed? What did Noah's resemblance to him mean to my parents? And most importantly, did I even want to reopen the painful wound of their abandonment? Noah, perceptive as always, noticed my distraction. "Mommy, you keep forgetting things," he observed one evening when I'd put his sandwich in his lunchbox without removing the crusts, a cardinal sin in preschooler world. "I'm sorry, buddy. Mommy has a lot on her mind. Are you thinking about those people from my party, the ones who looked sad?" His question startled me. "Why do you ask?" "Because you got sad after they came." "Are they bad people?" The simplicity of his question demanded an equally simple answer, though I had none. Were my parents bad people, or just broken ones who had made terrible choices? "No, honey, they're not bad people. They're actually your grandparents, my mom and dad." His eyes widened. "Like Jason's grandpa who gives him candy." "Well, they haven't been grandparents to you yet. Sometimes families have complicated histories." "Can they be my grandparents now?" His innocent question pierced my heart. "I don't know, Noah. That would depend on lots of grown-up things." He seemed to accept this vague answer, but the conversation stayed with me. Despite everything, Noah deserved to know his heritage, his biological connections. The question was whether my parents deserved to know him. 10 days after the birthday party, the decision was made for me. A knock at our apartment door revealed my parents standing awkwardly in the hallway. My father clutched a gift bag with cartoon dinosaurs printed on it. My mother held what looked like a photo album. "We checked out of the hotel," my father explained, "but we couldn't leave town without trying again. Please, Eden, 15 minutes is all we ask." Noah was at a playdate, giving me the rare luxury of uninterrupted adult conversation. After a moment's hesitation, I stepped back to let them enter. The contrast between my parents and our modest apartment was jarring. My mother's pearl earrings probably cost more than our living room furniture. My father's polished shoes looked out of place on our worn carpet. They sat stiffly on the edge of the sofa, taking in the evidence of our life together. Noah's artwork on the refrigerator, his toys organized in colorful bins, photos documenting our journey as a family of 2. "You've made a nice home," my mother offered awkwardly. "We manage." I remained standing, arms crossed. "Why are you here after all this time? What do you want?" My father placed the gift bag on the coffee table. This is for Noah, for his birthday, though I suppose he has enough toys already. He doesn't need gifts from strangers. The harshness in my voice made them both flinch, but I couldn't soften the edges of 5 years' worth of hurt. We deserve that, my father acknowledged. We deserve your anger and much more. What we did to you was unforgivable. Then why are you here? My mother opened the photo album she'd brought. Because of this. Because when we saw Noah, it was like seeing Michael again. She turned the album toward me. The first page showed a boy around 5 years old with dark curls and a wide smile revealing a missing front tooth. A boy who could have been Noah's twin. Your brother would have been your senior by 15 years if he had lived, my mother explained, her voice unsteady. He died from leukemia just after his 6th birthday, 9 years before you were born. I sat down heavily in the armchair across from them, the weight of this revelation pressing me down. You never talked about him. Not once during my entire childhood. No, my father admitted. We didn't. After he died, the pain was so overwhelming that we made a terrible decision. We packed away his things, removed his photos, and agreed never to speak of him again. We thought it would help us heal. But it didn't, my mother continued. Instead, the grief went underground. It poisoned everything. Her hands trembled as she turned pages in the album. When we had you years later, the doctors called you our miracle baby after several miscarriages. You became our second chance, my father said. Our opportunity to protect a child in ways we couldn't protect Michael. But our fear of losing you twisted into something unhealthy. We became controlling, overprotective. And when you got pregnant, my mother's voice cracked. It felt like losing everything again, like history repeating itself. Another child we couldn't protect from pain. The explanation unfolded like a map to a territory I'd navigated blindly my entire life. Suddenly, the excessive rules, the obsession with my health and safety, the impossible standards, all of it reflected parents traumatized by loss and never properly healed. So you threw me away, I said flatly. Because I disappointed you. Because we were terrified, my father corrected gently. Terrified and responding from old wounds rather than love. It was the greatest mistake of our lives, and we've paid for it every day for 5 years. We tried to continue as before, my mother added. Going to church, maintaining appearances. But nothing was the same. About 2 years ago, Pastor Richardson noticed something was wrong and recommended grief counseling. We finally started dealing with Michael's death, 30 years too late, my father said. And in therapy, we confronted what we'd done to you as well. The therapist helped us see how our unresolved grief corrupted our ability to love you unconditionally. So what? I challenged. You worked through your issues and now expect me to welcome you back with open arms. Do you have any idea what these 5 years have been like? Sleeping in my car while pregnant, working 2 jobs with a newborn, having no one to call when Noah had a high fever at 2 a.m. Tears streamed down my mother's face. No, we can never understand what you went through alone, and we don't expect forgiveness. We just needed you to know the truth. About Michael, about why we failed you so completely. And about Noah, my father added. Seeing him was like looking at Michael's ghost. The resemblance is uncanny. Genetic memory skipping a generation, the doctor called it. I processed this information slowly, trying to integrate it with everything I thought I knew about my family and childhood. So, my entire life was shaped by a brother I never knew existed. And now Noah somehow carries his image forward. We're not asking to be grandparents, my father said carefully. We haven't earned that right. But perhaps eventually you might consider allowing us to know Noah, not for our sake but for his, to understand his heritage. The request hung in the air between us. Part of me wanted to throw them out to protect Noah from the conditional love that had damaged me. Another part recognized that despite everything, these people were connected to him by blood and history. I need time, I finally said. And if, a very big if, I ever allow you into Noah's life, it would be on strict conditions. At the first sign of judgment or conditional acceptance, you'd be gone for good. That's more than we deserve, my father said quietly. It is, I agreed. And I'm not making any promises. Noah is my priority. His emotional well-being comes before any family reconciliation. My mother nodded, wiping tears. We understand. We'll respect whatever you decide. As they prepared to leave, my father handed me a business card. Our cell numbers and email. The ball is entirely in your court, Eden. We'll wait as long as it takes. After they left, I sat alone in the apartment surrounded by evidence of the life Noah and I had built without them. The photo album they'd left behind lay open to images of a boy my son mysteriously resembled, an uncle he'd never know but somehow carried forward in his DNA. The revelation explained so much about my childhood while complicating my feelings toward my parents. Their behavior was still inexcusable, but understanding its roots in unprocessed trauma made it comprehensible in ways it hadn't been before. As I heard Noah's excited chatter coming up the exterior stairs with his friend's mother, I quickly closed the album and tucked it away. Whatever decision I made about my parents would require careful consideration of Noah's needs above all else, something my parents had failed to do with me 5 years earlier. The irony wasn't lost on me. I had learned to be a better parent from their negative example than from any positive guidance they had provided. 6 months passed before I allowed my parents to have their first supervised visit with Noah. During that time, we established clear boundaries through email exchanges and 2 conversations without Noah present. I needed to see consistent evidence of change before risking my son's emotional well-being. The first visit took place at a neutral location, a public park with playground equipment where Noah could play while adults conversed nearby. I prepared him carefully, explaining that these people were my parents who lived far away, a small lie to explain their absence and wanted to meet him. Like a special play date, he asked, trying to understand the concept. Something like that. They're called grandparents, but you can just call them Mr. James and Mrs. Diana until you feel comfortable with them. I watched my parents carefully as they interacted with Noah, looking for signs of the judgment and conditional love that had characterized my upbringing. Instead, I saw nervous excitement as they awkwardly tried to connect with a 5-year-old who showed them his favorite action figures and demonstrated his climbing skills. He's extraordinary, Eden, my mother said quietly as we watched Noah navigate the monkey bars. You've done an amazing job raising him. The compliment felt strange coming from her, but the genuine admiration in her voice was undeniable. My father, meanwhile, had gotten down on his knees despite his dress pants to examine a cool rock Noah had discovered. That first visit lasted only an hour. Many more followed over subsequent months, each slightly longer and more relaxed than the last. Noah, with a child's natural curiosity and forgiveness, accepted these new people in his life without the baggage I carried. He enjoyed the attention and gradually developed a genuine fondness for them. My parents, for their part, seemed transformed by therapy and the painful years of separation. Gone was the rigid judgment that had dominated our household. Instead, they approached Noah with a humility and gratitude that acknowledged the gift of his presence rather than assuming entitlement to it. When Thanksgiving approached, Noah asked if his new grandparents could join us for dinner. After considerable thought, I agreed to a meal at my parents' house, my first time returning to my childhood home since the night they'd thrown me out. Walking through that front door nearly overwhelmed me with conflicting emotions. The house looked both exactly the same and completely different. Family photos still lined the hallway, but new ones had appeared, including surprisingly several of Noah from the visits of recent months. Most striking was a previously empty wall now dedicated to Michael. Photos of the brother I'd never known throughout his short life, alongside information about the foundation my parents had apparently established in his memory to fund childhood leukemia research. We decided it was time to acknowledge him properly, my father explained, noticing my attention. Both to honor his memory and to remind ourselves of the damage secrets can cause. The Thanksgiving meal itself proved less awkward than expected. Noah's presence provided natural conversation topics, and my parents made visible efforts to engage me as an adult rather than reverting to old patterns. The pivotal moment came after dessert when Noah had gone to play with Legos my father had set up in the living room. My mother refreshed our coffee cups, and my father cleared his throat uncomfortably. Eden, I need to say something that's long overdue. His voice was thick with emotion. What your mother and I did when you told us you were pregnant was unforgivable. We failed you completely as parents when you needed us most. My mother added, "We've spent 5 years regretting the most horrible mistake of our lives. We don't expect your forgiveness, but we want you to know that we recognize how wrong we were." "The way you've raised Noah," my father continued, "with such love and stability despite having no support. It shames me. You're twice the parent I ever was." The acknowledgement I'd never expected to hear broke something loose inside me. Tears I hadn't allowed myself for years flowed freely. "I was so scared," I admitted. "Sleeping in my car, not knowing how I'd feed myself, let alone a baby. I kept thinking you'd change your minds, that your love wasn't actually conditional, but you never came. We'll spend the rest of our lives trying to make that right," my mother said, reaching cautiously for my hand across the table. "If you'll let us." The road to rebuilding trust proved long and sometimes difficult. Old patterns occasionally resurfaced, requiring firm boundaries and honest conversations. My parents attended family therapy sessions with me, working to understand how their treatment had affected me and learning healthier ways to relate. Noah benefited tremendously from the expanded circle of love. My mother taught him to bake cookies using family recipes. My father took him fishing and built elaborate block constructions on the living room floor. They attended his kindergarten Christmas pageant, appropriately proud but respectful of my primary role in his life. Meanwhile, my own life continued evolving beyond motherhood. I completed my bachelor's degree online, while my website design business grew steadily. The financial breathing room allowed us to move to a small house with an actual yard, still rented but with space for Noah to play and a dedicated office for my growing business. What surprised me most was discovering that true forgiveness wasn't about forgetting the harm or pretending it never happened. Rather, it meant acknowledging the full reality of what occurred while choosing to move forward unburdened by resentment. I could remember being homeless and pregnant while also accepting my parents' genuine remorse and changed behavior. The final healing moment came unexpectedly during a Sunday afternoon visit to my parents' home. Noah was playing in the backyard under my father's supervision, while my mother and I prepared snacks in the kitchen. "I found something I think you should have," she said, retrieving a small box from a cabinet. Inside was a delicate silver bracelet with a single charm, a pair of angel wings. "This was the last gift we gave Michael before he died," she explained. "I thought perhaps you might want it for Noah to connect him to the uncle he resembles so much but never knew." The gesture represented everything that had changed. My mother was finally sharing Michael rather than hiding him, acknowledging connections rather than severing them, and respecting my role as Noah's mother to decide about the gift. Through the kitchen window, I watched Noah chasing butterflies while my father patiently followed their laughter carrying across the yard. The scene represented something I never thought possible years earlier. A family rebuilt from its broken pieces, different from before, but somehow stronger at the fracture points. The journey from that terrible night of rejection to this peaceful Sunday afternoon had been longer and harder than anyone deserved. But standing there holding a bracelet that connected 3 generations through both pain and healing, I recognized that family, real family, wasn't defined by perfect behavior or meeting expectations. True family was found in the courage to acknowledge mistakes, the strength to set boundaries, and the grace to begin again even after the deepest betrayals. Noah had taught me that through his unconditional love. And somehow, against all odds, my parents were learning it too. As Noah ran toward the house with a newly discovered treasure to show us his face alight with simple joy, I slipped the bracelet into my pocket. Some connections, I realized, were too powerful to be permanently broken, even when we tried our hardest to sever them. Have you ever had to rebuild a relationship that seemed beyond repair? I'd love to hear your stories in the comments below. If you found meaning in my journey, please subscribe to hear more stories of healing and redemption. Remember to like this video and share with anyone who might need to hear that even the deepest family wounds can sometimes heal in unexpected ways. Thank you for joining me through this difficult but ultimately hopeful story. No matter what family challenges you're facing, I hope you find the strength to create the loving connections everyone deserves.